Hey guys, this is Tumbleweed Joe. As I mentioned in my last video, this channel is taking a new direction. So if you like what you see here, please like, share, and subscribe, and hit the little bell icon. This video is a commentary that comes from an essay from my site, Tumbleweed Station on joeybreslinwrites.com. There'll be a link in the description. And along those lines, I wanted to let you know that I'm coming out with a book of short stories in early fall. I don't have the exact date yet, but that will definitely be reported to you. And if you'd like to read some of my writing, both fiction and nonfiction, you can find it at joeybreslinwrites.com in the short story section. Also, if you're at all interested in reading an advanced copy so that you could leave an honest review on whatever review site you prefer, Amazon or wherever you read books, let me know through the contact form on my website, which again is joeybreslinwrites.com. This video essay, this commentary, is called Scattered Thoughts on PC First Woke Entertainment. I'm looking at the evolution or the devolution from politically correct tropes and forms in the shows that I grew up with to this new sort of hyper PC, which we call woke. And I'm going to do that in particular by looking at two scenes with actually the same actress many years apart. That gives us a good sense of this passage from one of those forms of framing a story to another. So without further ado, I've been musing a lot on the evolution from political correctness in entertainment to wokeness in entertainment. It seems obvious that the latter is really just an exaggerated mutation of the former. Like most mutations, it's a degradation. Wikipedia says political correctness is a term used to describe language, policies, or measures that are intended to avoid offense or disadvantage to members of particular groups in society. Now, I have not found an equally useful definition of wokeness, but it's definitely all that PC is and then some. So I'm going to take a stab at it. Woke refers to language, policies, and measures designed to attack commonly held categories of sexual and social identity, as well as universally recognized standards of ethics, logic, and fair play, in order to supplant them with contrary or amorphous conceptions of the same, each having a tendency to annihilate essential categories and to reduce every human interaction to a series of power relations. So those two elements come up in all of the woke material that we're seeing now. Usurpation of an original form, an attack on that form, and the supplanting of it with a new amorphous form that tends to turn everything into a series of power relations. Put in another way, a PC mind is trying to frame reality in a preferred way by excluding facts it would rather not admit, and by promoting scenarios that it prefers were true, regardless of whether they are true. A woke mind seeks to redefine social reality from the top down by only permitting discussions, thoughts, or even words that correspond to a desired set of outcomes, and pointedly by annihilating and purging any contrary ideas. So PC is the respectable upper middle class enlightened fibber who thinks her little lies are justified for the greater good. Woke is her vicious stepchild, highly moralistic in her tone, yet entirely amoral in her methods. Against this backdrop, I'd like to contrast scenes from two big-budget movies, decades apart, that show the devolution from PC to woke. Both of them involve Laura Dern. Now, if you check this essay out on my website, I have the relevant scenes embedded in the article, but I'll do my best to go over them here, and hopefully you can forgive my reading of the short dialogue here. In 1993's Jurassic Park, Dern's Ellie Sattler character has to go outside and do a thing while Professor Hammond stays back. A moment of cringe dialogue follows, which I don't recall being in the book, but anyway. Professor Hammond: "It ought to be me, really, going." Ellie Sattler: "Why?" Because and you're a... Look, we can discuss sexism in survival situations when I get back. Here's a textbook example of PC, excluding facts it would rather not admit, and promoting scenarios it would prefer to be true. Professor Hammond is actually doubly correct here. First, Jurassic Park is his mess, and he should not be putting someone else at risk. Second, if he is any sort of man, then of course the thought of putting a woman at bodily risk, rather than himself, should be abhorrent to him. There's nothing really anti-woman about this. And really, what woman on earth, what woman listening to this video, would respect a man? I mean a real man, not a man from your gender studies class, but an actual man that you saw in real life, who put her in harm's way while sitting on his own laurels. Those are the facts excluded by the scene. But the other side of PC is promoting scenarios that the PC person wishes were true, rather than those that are likely to occur. Yes, some women are capable of incredible acts of bodily courage and risk-taking, at least under highly specific circumstances. But normally, how many women do you know, personally, who would run out and fight dinosaurs? Or put another way, in a room of 100 people, half male and half female, and all of whom have the option to run out and fight dinosaurs, and possibly save everyone, though possibly get gutted, or stay inside and hide from the dinosaurs, possibly saving themselves, what percentage of the runners out would be women? Obviously, this changes if the woman's own offspring are under direct threat, but I digress. Compare the percentage of actual women you personally know who find snakes, spiders, and presumably giant bloodthirsty reptilians, along with the real prospect of violent death, both disgusting and panic-inducing, to the number of women on Hammond's Island in this movie. What are the chances that Ellie Sattler, a field paleobotanist and almost the sole woman on the island, just happens to be a member of the vanishingly small group of dragon-slaying women who can throw down as good as the boys in survival situations? The purpose of this kind... Oh, by the way, I mean, how cheap is it to have her going up against an old man? Besides the fact that he's literally the stereotypical old man. Of course, if there's any man who's going to be, likely to stay back in that situation, it's going to be an old man. So good for you, Ellie Sattler. You're tougher than the old man. Anyway, the purpose of this kind of scene is not to tell the truth, but rather to promote wish fulfillment. But in another infamous scene, Laura Dern plays a character who takes wish fulfillment orders of magnitude past mere PC into the hubristic and self-delusional land of the woke. In doing so, she shows how far things have progressed in the field of cinematic bullshit that sacrifices art to the message. In 2017's The Last Jedi, Dern plays Admiral Holdo. And I actually linked this scene. I embedded it on my sites, my joeybresenwrites.com, Tumbleweed Station. You can check it out there. In a series of scenes where, with unintentional humor, Holdo is surrounded by a veritable army of supportive sisters, the Lady Admiral is verbally accosted by an enraged Poe Dameron. Poe is angry because his toxic male instincts, those same instincts that account for his being a brave and skilled fighter pilot rather than a manicured desk jockey like Holdo, are being undermined by what he believes, and has every reason to believe, are the cowardly and indecisive actions of the Admiral. Now, in pre-woke days, a scene like this, where a subordinate officer confronts a seemingly corrupt and cowardly superior, would have led to a tense showdown, ending perhaps in the arrest of the superior officer and the final vindication of the inferior officer. Good old-fashioned David and Goliath stuff. But this superior officer is a woman, and Poe is just a frustrated, toxic male. Naturally, then, Poe is in the wrong. Viewers soon learn the truth. A truth that Poe was too blinded to see because he was thinking of war in terms of narrow traditional categories such as attacking, evading, holding the line, and other such mannish tripe. The truth is that the all-wise Holdo has a secret plan. What is this secret plan? Why, nothing less than to sacrifice herself by hyperspacing through the First Order's battleship, while slowly ferrying the crew and passengers to this place that she knows about, just around the corner in space. She knows a lot of stuff Poe doesn't know, but that's because she's a knower. Now, leaving aside for the moment that this plan could not work, as everybody on the internet now knows, and that Poe couldn't guess it because it makes absolute nonsense of the established rules of the Star Wars universe, Holdo's style of leadership in this scene is still nothing short of execrable. Of course, a competent pilot is going to have questions about what seems, to all appearances, to be a cowardly series of maneuvers that will destroy the crew and end the Resistance hopes. And any competent admiral would understand how things looked and how things must look, and that something like general battle strategy is not the private gnosis of only a few higher-ups. It's a form of knowledge accessible to all competent people under her command. Especially somebody like Poe Dameron, who is a hero and a tactical genius. He's going to know some things. And if she had a need for secrecy in this matter, when things look so bad, she should at least have pulled Poe aside and let him in on the plan. He might have protested her self-sacrifice. He might have tried to persuade her to give it one more try and only then sacrifice herself. Being a disgusting, egotistical man, he might have even volunteered to sacrifice himself. After all, sacrificing yourself for a greater cause is almost the defining characteristic of a man. It's the thing that boys dream about doing since the time they're small kids. Even men who are kind of wasting their lives doing nothing but playing video games. What are they doing in these video games? They're imagining themselves fighting a great battle, putting themselves at risk for some great cause. This is a big part of what it means to be a man. To try to do something great for the sake of others, and to win glory in that way. But anyway. Heck, by the way, he might have even tried to explain to Holdo that the hyperspace doesn't work the way she thinks it does in the Star Wars universe, okay? Whereupon she could have explained to him that now it does work that way. Because, you know what, Disney doesn't give a shit about canon anymore, Poe. But he would at least have respected her. And he would have understood that she wasn't sacrificing the crew and the Resistance hopes to her own incompetence and cowardice. But no, he just mansplains. Well, what he actually does in that scene is challenge her, and this is important, in exactly the same way that any man would challenge another man under identical circumstances. Let me repeat that because it's so important to understanding what is wrong with the woke way of looking at reality. He challenges her in the same way that any man would challenge another man under identical circumstances. And this is where the scene's wokeness shines through. Because he's a man and she is a woman, his actions are not to be interpreted as what they plainly contextually are, i.e., one officer confronting another over apparent cowardly incompetence, but rather as an out-of-control man challenging a woman and refusing to believe her. I mean the nerve. Now think about this. Men challenge each other all the time. Ladies, listening to this. Listen to men in discussion. Listen to how often they challenge each other. It is the way we communicate in order to arrive at the truth, at the best decision. We challenge each other. That's a big part of the way that difficult problems are worked out, by clashing together of contrary points of view until a synthesis can be arrived at, or until a better view can be demonstrated to be better. But anyway, according to the movie, of course, being a woman, she's wiser and more cool-headed than he. His brand of brash, swashbuckling decisiveness might make him feel better, but that's just exactly why men ruin everything and cause all the wars. Tell that to the writers of the Icelandic sagas, by the way. But anyway, women know these things. As super popular character Rose Tico later puts it, while educating another poor benighted male that's trying to sacrifice himself for the greater good, that's how we're going to win. Not by fighting what we hate, but by saving what we love. Gag me with a spoon. But this is what we've come to. And while viewers of Jurassic Park only had to endure a few cringe-worthy slights at man and crazy exaggerations of female power, these were sensibly kept to a minimum so as to leave the main story intact. It was, after all, the 90s. Companies wanted to make money back then, I guess. Hollywood types have always been liberal and have always used scripts to virtue signal and gain social credit. But those film companies still wanted to make money and tell stories that audiences loved. So they slipped that stuff in, but it was, stuff you had to put up with in an otherwise awesome movie. And now it's not so clear if it matters to these companies what audiences think. It's even less clear that these studios understand that a loss of audience interest must translate to a loss of sales. The Last Jedi and most subsequent Disney forays into Star Wars, The Mandalorian is largely an exception to this, along with its most recent Marvel outings, have tripped over themselves to drive home and feature in a central and defining way both the wishful thinking of the old PC pirates and the even more thoroughgoing radicalism of their woke intellectual offspring. Something in the air has changed so that these companies either do not care about alienating the very audiences that pay them, or else are so riven with brained woke co-religionists that they literally cannot tell stories without subordinating the stories to their personal ideological obsessions. All the elements of woke entertainment and especially of woke usurpations of traditional IPs are now firmly in place. And now remember, I mentioned that before. This is essential to the woke thing. It's attacking the traditional form, the traditional story, but also usurping it, taking the form, the very medium that people love, and loading it with new content which is contrary to the substance of that thing which is loved. This might work in the short term to get your message out, but it is repulsive to people, and it turns them off to the product. But anyway, here's the playbook, the woke playbook. You can easily list it in bullet point form. First, beloved male characters are to be killed off or castrated or made buffoonish or pushed to the background or shown to have never really been as great as everyone thought they were. Luke Skywalker. Beloved female characters are to be brought to the foreground and rendered more central than their male counterparts. Any one of a dozen examples. Leia can fly through space, apparently. New male characters are to be given some cool scenes, but also put in their place, lest they take up air needed by new female characters. New female characters are to have little or no learning curve and are to be shown to be somehow already in possession of skills and instincts that ought to have taken them decades, if not years, if not decades, to hone. This is your typical Mary Sue character, of which there are many. New characters, especially female characters, are to be portrayed as trauma survivors. Nobody has a wholesome background. Female villains, while being portrayed as equal to or greater in badassery than male villains, must never actually be evil. Somewhere in their past, a man, or maybe a patriarchy, has hurt them. Fatherhood must never be shown in a positive, wholesome light, except as a means of validating a daughter figure. This includes institutional fatherhood in the form of old, solid, reliable things. These must be shown to be full of holes and hypocrisy. And really, when it comes to the fatherhood validating, being used just to validate something else. I mean, Disney was doing this. Never mind. I'm going off on a tangent here. But to keep going, to more of these sort of essential woke usurpation points that you find in movie after movie, property after property, comics, films, video games that have been wokeified. Masculine traits are to be portrayed as problematic, unless wielded by a female, in which case they are to be portrayed as indispensable and admirable. Male characters who are strong, thoroughly masculine and admirable, are not to be admitted into stories under any circumstances, save temporarily, to validate a strong female character. If possible, these worthy males should be killed off or otherwise neutered once this task of validation has been accomplished. This repeats a little bit a point I made earlier about the validating the daughter figure. But I'm dying to see this Batwoman movie that we're not going to be able to see. Because given that this Batgirl or Batwoman character was supposed to be the new Batman in the DCU, she wasn't just an additional Bat person. She was going to be the new Bat person. And they had Michael Keaton in this movie. I am virtually certain that the way they used Michael Keaton in this movie was to be the traditional Batman figure validating the new one. He's there to say, hey, I want you, audience, to know that I approve of this new Batman. Yeah, I mean, now at this point we'll never know, but that would be very much par for the course of what we've seen so far. Anyway, this list could be longer, but one only has so much time to dwell on this kind of disorder. And speaking of only having so much of something, just how much money are Disney, Netflix, Amazon, and others willing to lose in order to advance these new woke causes? Just how much money do these companies think a guy like me would be willing to spend to watch them castrate and destroy all these beloved characters? These people must realize that we needn't go to their films, nor stream their latest wokeified takedowns or usurpations of traditional IPs. They do realize that, don't they? Don't they? Anyway, just a few random thoughts from yours truly, Tumbleweed Joe. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. And please check out my website, joeybreslinwrites.com. And if you look at the